to work in the first Bush administration as Assistant Secretary of Housing, Federal Housing Commissioner, and left in 1990 saying, these guys are going to get a hold of the technology and kill us all. We need a plan. I was looking for Plan B starting in 1990. Anyway, so I created an investment bank in Washington called Hamilton Securities that was very successful and, among other things, was prototyping local and place-based development. And we ran right into the problem that what we were doing was working and it was stopping centralization. And among other things, it was bringing transparency to how money worked locally and the fact that the government was running some money illegally. And, they've continued to engage in massive financial and securities fraud since. Anyway, so that inspired me to get into an 11-year war with the Department of Justice. And for those of you who've seen the movie Enemy of the State, I always say I played Will Smith in real life. And it was sort of an outward bound training program in covert operations and sort of legal and financial and spiritual warfare. When that was done, I started two businesses. One was the Solari Report, and the other was Solari Investment Advisory. And I worked for 10 years as an investment advisor to individuals and families, and now that company just does a screening. And in the process of trying to figure out what the truth was, I found these books from a guy named Dr. Joseph Farrell, and I was unbelievably impressed. So I bought everything he'd ever written, and it never occurred to me that I could meet him.
Yeah, I know. I'm the same. I haven't read the latest one.
It's fabulous. Oh, you have to read it. It's a must read.
Oh, I know.
You really have to read it. It's a must read. I read it and I thought, oh my God, it's been going on for thousands of years.
Yeah.
I don't want to give it away. You have to read it.
Well, and that's a great point to bring up. What I'm trying to do here is your background is financial and political. We're going to find out about Joseph's background. He's a very well-read in history, and of course has a degree in patristics, which is study of the early fathers of the church. So he has a very much different perspective on what we're doing. And then my background is media. I've been working in professional media and entertainment since I was 12, so 47 years.
Wow.
So we have a very diverse background going on here. Joseph, tell us a little bit about you.
Well, I got into all of this kind of like I seem to get into everything, kind of backing into it. But, studying patristics, people think of it as a very kind of narrow degree. And it really isn't, because you have to know lots of languages, obviously, and you have to know philosophy, law, history of science, and all that stuff. And it trains you to read texts. And I started reading all these ancient texts kind of in conjunction with my studies, and noticing that if you read them from the standpoint of modern science, they were rather sophisticated texts. So I kind of started writing some of my kooky theories, years ago. I didn't have any intention whatsoever that it would develop into a career, but it did. And, so that's what I do. And I'm kind of like Catherine. I heard her on Coast to Coast years and years ago when she started talking about all the missing money and, where was it going? And I thought, well, I'm running into the same thing, There's gobs of money that no one can account for. And I had the same kind of experience, Catherine. I thought, I've got to meet this lady. How do I meet this lady? And it just sort of happened. We just kind of backed into each other because she was noticing all this missing money, and I was noticing all this missing money. And, I had come to the conclusion, well, we're dealing with some sort of gigantic, huge hidden system of finance that involves lots of fraud. And,
Yeah.
And so here we are,
Yeah, And it's interesting because Catherine is coming at it from the present day, working backwards. You're coming at it from the past, working forwards.
Right.
It makes for a very interesting nexus of viewpoints here. And to launch things, I want to give the actual facts that we know about Q.
Okay.
All right. Strip away everything that everybody has said, good, bad, or indifferent. Here's what we know. On the 28th of October 2017, an anonymous entity, began posting on 4chan in the political discussion thread with a note that said Hillary Clinton would be arrested within 24 to 48 hours. Extradition process had already begun with several countries in case she tried to run, and the National Guard had been activated, thank you, to quell any social unrest. And it developed over time. After about 2 weeks, I think it was drop number 64, the entity began signing itself as Q. Up to that point, it had said that it was the Q level
clearance.
Right. Yes. And from that point, it began to develop. By April, it had switched to 8chan or Infinity Chan, and then that got shut down for 90 days last year, and came back as 8kun, K-U-N, and is continuing to post. And other than what has actually been written in the Q drops, that is all that we know as fact about Q. That's it.
Right.
Everything else is speculation and conjecture and people's hopes and dreams and whatever is going on. And we'll get into that right now. But I just wanted to establish the fact that no one knows anything about Q other than what I just said. There are no other facts.
Well, yeah, I started watching the thing develop almost from the very beginning, because people on my website had picked up on it and were saying, "Oh, you got to go look at this because it seems to be perfectly accurate," and so on. And the expectation began to be created among the followers, the QAnon people, the followers, of imminent arrests and so on and so forth. And so, and there was, what disturbed me about it, Bernard, was that the Q source itself, the first thing that I thought of when I heard Q wasn't all this business about clearance and so on. I was thinking in terms of Quelle, the German word for source, that is used in biblical scholarship when you study the so-called synoptic gospels, Matthew, Mark, Luke, and Luke. And Quelle, in their thinking, is the source document, so to speak, that's behind the resemblance of those three gospels. And I thought, well, that's interesting, because it immediately casts the whole operation, if I was correct, in this kind of religious context. And as a result of that, watching it develop, I thought, boy, this really is hitting all the symbols of a religion, of an ecclesiastically designed operation. And then the other thing I noticed, and Catherine nailed it very early on, she says it's hope porn. Because there would be these breadcrumbs, as they call them, these drops or releases of information that appeared to make sense out of what we were seeing in the news and giving them a twist. So in other words, it began to look to me like it was some sort of disinformation operation. There was just enough truth in it to keep people hooked and following. And again, I was thinking in terms of the American civil religion, as I like to call it, much of which is influenced by dispensationalist theology. And watching this happen, and then watching the attitude of people that were following it being shaped and formed by it, I thought, whoa, this is very sophisticated. And whoever's behind this, orchestrating these little information drops, it began to look to me like, number one, it was a team. It wasn't one person. It was a team
Right.
of some sort. And secondly, it began to look to me like they've got access to some very sophisticated computer modeling. And, you know, since we're talking about finance, the other thing that popped into my mind was, well, this is kind of the same sort of thing that we're seeing with algorithmic trading going on in the markets. So, you know, I thought this thing is way, way beyond somebody, you know, just having some sort of fun with people. This is a very serious